Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, August the 5th, 2025. Today there are a couple of anniversaries. It's the anniversary of the death of Marilyn Monroe. Well, actually, Marilyn Monroe died on the evening of August the 4th, 1962, but I know I'm doing this video for August the 5th, so I'll sort of treat this as the anniversary, the 63rd anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death. And, she remains an iconic figure. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on her horoscope in this video, but I thought I would just have a quick look at it, consider what was going on at the time of her death, and also it's the anniversary of a tragic event in Spain in 1939. In 1939, August the 5th, in Madrid, 13 young women were executed, and a lot of them were dressmakers, and they were part of some socialist youth movement, and it was the end of the Spanish Civil War, and there was a sort of final sort of massacre at the end of it by the Franco regime, and included in this massacre were these 13 young women called the 13 Roses. And so I thought I would look at this event, and I'd look at the horoscope of one of those women who she said in a letter to her family that she didn't want to be forgotten by history, so I thought it'd be a good idea to mention her name. And finally, it is Marine Le Pen's birthday, the French politician, one of the heads of the sort of a national rally, sort of right-wing political party in France. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on her horoscope, but I'll sort of look at her solar return and look at some of the stuff going on in her horoscope, over the next couple of years. But before I do all that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, August the 5th, 2025. So here is a chart. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. Top right, that is, of course, a picture of Marilyn Monroe, who died 63 years ago. And so looking at this chart, we have the moon at 29 degrees Sagittarius at noon New York time. So the moon is getting ready to move into Capricorn. Moon moves into Capricorn London time at 4 minutes past 6 in the evening. So, if you are in Europe or Africa, then sort of early evening, there is a changeover. Moon moves into Capricorn. Perhaps things become more serious. Priorities might change, and suddenly there are things we have to consider that not so long ago we maybe didn't think were very important. Now, if you're in the Americas, then that sign change is going to be, it's going to be at 4 minutes past 1 in the afternoon in New York on the eastern coast. It's going to be sort of earlier, sort of late morning if you're in California. Not even late morning. It would be about 4 minutes past 10 in Oregon or California or British Columbia. So we do have this changeover. Now, the problem about the moon moving into Capricorn is that it does make square aspects to Saturn and Neptune. And so even before it moves into Capricorn, in very late Sagittarius, it's starting to make a square to Saturn and Neptune. And so with Moon square Saturn and Neptune, it's not just about feeling that sort of emotionally we may not be able to fully express ourselves, Moon square Saturn, or that we might get sort of emotionally confused or afraid, or something might be holding us back. It's also about bringing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction into focus, so the moon can be regarded as kind of a detonator, a trigger for the full energy of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And, just before the moon moves into Capricorn, it makes a square to Mars. So we've kind of got a T-square here. So this T-square today, there's Mars and Saturn starting to make an opposition with one another. And then, there's Moon on the T. And so, for many of us, it could be quite a frustrating day as that sign change happens. It may be difficult to get things done. We may get annoyed, and we may also have a rather negative view. Mars Saturn. It's a difficult aspect, and it's getting closer and closer. This Mars Saturn opposition. It's one of the important events of the week. So if we feel sort of passing negativity, and feeling that everything is just collapsing and that things can't go right, we should perhaps understand that this is connected with Mars Saturn, and that Moon is triggering this Mars Saturn opposition. And in one sense that sounds bad, but at least we know what's going on. And if we can pin the way we feel to what's going on astrologically, that means that we have a chance to get things in perspective. We have a time limit. We know that this Moon square Saturn is not going to last forever. Indeed, we know that the Mars Saturn opposition, it's getting stronger over the week, but it will eventually dissipate. And at the same time as this, we have got a quintile between the Sun and Uranus. So the Sun and Uranus are 72 degrees apart, which is 1/5 of the circle. So in spite of Mars Saturn, in spite of our concerns and perhaps even inhibitions, we want to make things happen. We really do with Sun quintile Saturn. And if we privately want to create change, then we can do it. And it's a very conscious process. We decide that we're not happy with the current situation, and we want to create something new. And with the Sun quintile Uranus, we can maybe do it. So it could be a planned revolution. Carefully thinking through, what we have to do. Additionally, there is a semi-sextile between Mercury and Venus. Mercury and Venus, you can see, they're 30 degrees apart, and that semi-sextile is contrasting Mercury retrograde in Leo with Venus in Cancer. So Mercury in Leo, Mercury might be retrograde, but still Mercury in Leo likes getting attention and wants to be taken seriously, and that's all well and good, but we do have to consider the emotional dimension, Venus in Cancer, and we have to think about other people and other people's sensibilities. And it's not that we have to shut up because we're concerned about other people. We have to be ourselves and get the attention we're looking for, but also take into account those sensibilities. And if we can get the balance right, we can use this Mercury-Venus sextile in a positive and constructive way. So, broad message here is, looking at the moon, that it may be a split day, a day that is split between moon in Sagittarius and moon in Capricorn. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon in Capricorn is not really going to be a feature of today, because here is the horoscope for Sydney, Australia, and the moon is at 22 degrees Sagittarius at noon. So that means that the moon is not going to be in Capricorn today. It's going to be in Sagittarius all day long. The moon is not really making any aspect. Oh, that's not true. It's making a square to Mars. So in fact, as the day progresses, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, you're going to feel the moon getting closer and closer to the square of Mars. The square of Saturn it's probably not going to be so much of a feature, not really until tomorrow. But with that moon square Mars, there could be a growing agitation as the day progresses, and something might be annoying you, or perhaps other people are going to be annoyed, and you have to sort of negotiate a path through all of that, looking after your own interests, but you don't want to cause an argument or a fight if it's unnecessary, do you? And so that's broadly, what is going on. So perhaps if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it could be a more angry day than if you are in the Americas. On the other hand, the moon is not making a square to Saturn, so right until tomorrow. So you're not going to feel that sort of Mars-Saturn energy that those of us in America, or even perhaps a little bit in Europe, are going to experience. And then there is the heliocentric view. So here are the planets placed around the sun. Of course, this is a heliocentric chart with the sun at the center of the solar system, and Mercury is doing some stuff. See, Mercury is at 25 degrees Aquarius heliocentrically, and it's making a trine to Mars, and it's making a square to Uranus. So we have a Mars-Uranus quincunx forming, and this quincunx is not going to be exact for a few more days, but Mercury brings it into focus, and with that trine to Mars and square to Uranus, so things are starting to be stirred up. People are maybe having ideas, and they could be overthinking. That is a possibility, particularly with Mercury square Uranus. Lots of things to think about, and when do we stop thinking? And we could just be quite agitated. We want change, and geocentrically we've got Sun quintile Uranus, and so we're not entirely happy with the way things are. We want to consciously make things happen, and perhaps we can. It may be possible, but we have to sort of get the balance right. We don't want to cause too much upset unless we feel that it's really necessary. So that's it. That's the general picture today, astrologically, and now I want to consider today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, August the 5th, 2025. Aries. It's a day when things are starting to change. You're moving from one thing to another thing, one set of priorities to another set, and at the beginning of the day you may feel that not a huge amount is happening, that there are things that you're trying to work out in your own time, in your own way, and you do seem to be aware that you haven't got all the answers, that there is more to be discovered, and you may also be aware that there might be some kind of deadline, that if you don't get it together by a particular time, then that's it. You can't gather any more information, and we also have some tension here because the moon is applying to a square of Mars. That moon square Mars can be quite angry, and so there may be times today when you really want to move forward with something, and you're wondering, have you got enough energy to do it? And you're trying your hardest, but part of you is also thinking, is it really worthwhile? But then it has to be worthwhile, and so there's a lot you're trying to cover, and you're probably not going to appreciate it if anyone gets in your way, and so you might lash out if you're being held back, and especially if something is done in a way that you hadn't expected, that you hadn't prepared for. That could be annoying. And then the moon changes sign. Now, this sign change is, of course, very dependent on your time zone. In the Americas, the sign change will happen by lunchtime, and so that would mean okay, maybe a bit beyond lunchtime. I'm thinking about the United States. Perhaps if you're in Brazil, it would be sort of later in the afternoon. But certainly by the afternoon, the sign change will have happened, and so the moon moves out of Sagittarius, into Capricorn. And when the moon does go into Capricorn, that can be quite motivating for an Aries. Suddenly, you're thinking about what needs to be done now, and you're being more sensible about it. And if you're in Europe, you still get the moon in Capricorn. Okay, that happens sort of early evening, but it's early evening. There's still quite a few hours of the day left. So when the moon moves into Capricorn, you start to think about what you'd like to be doing, what you should be doing. And the moon in Capricorn is making a square to Saturn. So moon square Saturn, you could say that moon square Saturn is a difficult aspect, because the moon can't fully express itself when it's square Saturn. Saturn is trying to close the moon down, but there is a positive side to it. Moon square Saturn can be very focused. You decide what's important. You give it everything you've got, and it might not be much fun, but you're making progress. And so there is a positive side there. But you also realize, Aries, that things are difficult, that nothing comes easily. And the moon is, because the moon is making a square to Mars, and then it makes a square to Saturn. So the moon is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and it's bringing that Mars-Saturn opposition together. And you can see the future, but you also realize how difficult things can be. And so maybe you just want to just be motivated, do things in your own way, and you certainly don't want to be interrupted, and you're going to be impatient of other people, especially if they have different priorities than you. They're trying to contradict you. They're trying to do things in a different way. That is not something that you're going to appreciate. And Aries, I should also remind you that Mars is getting very close to the Libra point. Mars is getting ready to move into Libra. Now, Mars moves into Libra, I think Mars moves into Libra on... Well, it moves into Libra tomorrow, or perhaps the day after. So it's about to move, to change sign. And so with Mars moving into Libra, well, that's important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's important because Mars is on the Aries point. So when Mars is on the Aries point, it's really focused. It's about the world. It's about your relationship to the world. And arguably, Mars is already on the Aries point. Mars is within 1 degree, is less than 1 degree away from 0 degrees Libra. So this is a time when the spotlight may be on you, and you may realize that you can have an impact. The world can listen to you. You don't have to keep quiet about things. But then also the Mars is about to move into Libra. And again, that is a real change. You were moving from a sort of Virgo way of functioning to a Libra way of functioning. And that's about to happen. So it is a changeover time. And because it's a changeover time, perhaps, Aries, you shouldn't be so desperate for action. I know that, action is important, but you don't know everything. And as you move from one state of being to another, be patient, and also just consider the possibility that something new might turn up, something that really hadn't occurred to you. And additionally, what might seem incredibly important today, in a couple of days' time, may seem only of secondary or even tertiary significance. Taurus. At the moment, Taurus, you're feeling that things aren't entirely straightforward. I mean, you would like them to be straightforward. You are a Taurus, after all, and Taurus is an earth sign. It wants to very much know what's going on, and it wants to be able to touch things, and be in touch, and have the security of knowing what things feel like. And at the moment, at least at the beginning of the day, that might not be there for you, and this could be annoying. And you thought you'd understood something, and now it's possible that you haven't understood it at all. At least that's how it appears. But sometimes, as you approach an understanding, things start to break down. You have just a moment of utter confusion, where you feel that you just have to sort of go back to the drawing board, and that might be might be very frustrating. It might be annoying. And one aspect we've got today is a square between the Moon and Mars, and Moon and Mars. It's annoying for everyone. Could be annoying for you, and you might be confused by the signals being given by other people, the information you're being given by other people, not just other people, by the world at large. You thought all the details were in order, and now it seems that they're not in order, and you're asking why. And you might be aware that, or believe that, a lot of time has been wasted. But in practice, things are okay. Because when you start to really understand something, you often are confused by it. Because if you don't understand something, you often think that it's simple, and you think it's easy. There's nothing to understand. You don't know what you don't know, but then as comprehension comes in, that's often when the doubts start, and then you reach a point where it suddenly becomes clear, and so clarity really is possible. And with clarity comes confidence, and then the moon at some stage today, okay, it might be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon moves into Capricorn. And from a Taurian perspective, I think the moon moving into Capricorn is fortunate in the end, but there may still be moments of frustration, because the moon is making a square to Saturn, and it's making a square to Mars, and so there just could be that moment of frustration, and then you're able to move beyond it, and finally get past the turbulence, and then there's just clarity. And so that's what you should be aiming for, and I do think that is something that you can find. Now, another thing, Taurus, is that at the moment you do actually have quite a lot of energy. You really do. There are a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things you can get off the ground, and once you start putting your energy into something, well, there'll be no stopping you. And so, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's a bad thing if you're putting your energy into something destructive or something that is wrong for you. But if you find something that is really an essential part of who you are, and it's something you value, and it's something that also connects with your own destiny, then I think that is great, and you can really throw this energy into things which really matter to you, and in the end, you could be in a position where you can accomplish a great deal. But still, I don't think that things are going to be entirely easy. I think that and that's going to become clear as the day unfolds. Everything is hard work. Everything might have to be struggled for, battled with, and at times you might feel that you're being defeated, that it's all too much. But if you keep going in that Taurean way, provided of course you keep going in the right direction. If you're going in the wrong direction, well, anything can happen. But if you keep going in the right direction, Taurus, then in the end, I think that things should start to move. And just don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by annoyances. The moon is square Mars, so moon square Mars, there may be times where you find another person really frustrating, and you might not appreciate their changes of mind or the things they say, but it's just another person. It's not you, and your destiny is about you. Another person cannot interfere with that destiny, provided that destiny is right for you. So don't let any one person spoil things, and just don't exaggerate. Don't exaggerate the significance of another person, and also look at things from their perspective. Not everyone is sure of what's going on. They just don't know, and when people are uncertain, they say things that sometimes they don't mean, or they just feel they have to say something. But don't overreact. I think that's going to be quite important today, Taurus. Gemini, you may believe that some people are important, that they require your attention, but I think that's probably not the case. I mean, there is today a square aspect between the moon and Mars, and this moon-Mars square could be frustrating, it could be annoying, and it may refer to someone who is really winding you up. They're just interfering with things, and they're requiring too much attention. And it's not a situation that is to your liking. And Gemini, rather than just overreact, consider what the situation is all about. And it may not be entirely simple. It may be that you're misreading what someone is doing, or maybe someone is trying to help and they can help, but you're not treating it like that. So don't jump to conclusions when dealing with other people. And you could, and just because you and another person are at odds with one another doesn't mean to say it can't be patched up. And it's not just because there's a moon square Mars. There is also a semi-sextile between Mercury and Venus. Mercury is your ruler. It's semi-sextile Venus. Now, Venus could be a representative of another person, could just represent another person in your life. And a person with a different perspective, Venus in Cancer, possibly someone who appears to be more emotional than you, perhaps more sensitive than you, and you're trying to deal with them. You're trying to create some kind of balance. You understand that you and you're very different from one another, and you're working with these differences. And Mercury is retrograde, so you don't fully know what's going on. Although it's not as bad as it used to be, because Mercury is Mercury is still close to the Sun, but Mercury is moving away from combustion. Combustion is when the Sun and Mercury are sort of 8 degrees apart, and right now they're barely 8 degrees apart. So you're starting to have some clarity here, and if you're honest with yourself, you can perhaps understand what the other person is trying to say, and you might then have an appreciation of them that maybe wasn't there before. So there's possibly some work to be done in terms of relationships, and you've got to take things slowly and not have too many expectations. Your ability to get on with people, it's not 100% at the moment, and things could be slow, and it might at times be difficult to really express what you think and what you feel, and that's just the way it is. And so if you are honest with yourself, and you're honest with your own with your own faults, they might be just temporary faults, relating to the fact that Mercury is retrograde. Mercury's not going to be retrograde forever. I mean, Mercury is it changes direction, goes stationary direct. I think that's on Monday. So this Mercury retrograde period is pretty much over. You've got less than a week of it left. So it shouldn't be too bad. And there's no need to overreact. And then the moon is also changing sign. The moon is moving out of Sagittarius and it's moving into Capricorn. And with that sign change, you're being asked perhaps to be more sensitive, to accept that there is always an emotional side to things, and perhaps in a recent past you haven't given it enough attention, and it's an emotional side which relates to depth and intensity, and all sorts of things require emotional awareness. It's not just relationships, it's loads of other things. It's money, it's work, it's your relationship to the past. All of it requires a high level of emotional maturity, and certainly over the next couple of days, as the moon moves through Capricorn. And because the moon is making not just a square, when it moves into Capricorn, it makes not just a square to Saturn, it makes a square to Neptune. And you have to sort of move beyond those first feelings of confusion, and to get underneath and really try to understand what is happening. And so don't take things at a surface level, because that's not where the action is, and it's not where the knowledge is. You can't just get knowledge by just looking at things from a surface. That will right now, because that will tell you very little. Cancer. If you're not careful, today could be rather annoying, and there might be things you want to do. You might have plans, but actually getting it all to happen, it could be hard work, and you might find that there are disruptions, annoyances, and frustrations that may seem quite unavoidable. And part of a problem is that the moon is changing signs. So the moon is moving from sort of late Virgo, late Sagittarius into early Capricorn. And so the moon, as it moves through late Sagittarius, it moves towards a square of Mars, and then it moves into Capricorn, and it makes a square to Saturn and Neptune. So whichever way you look at it, you've got squares involving Mars, Saturn and Neptune. And so if you're, for example, an Australian Cancer, then that Moon-Mars square is going to be the thing to be really concentrating on. If you're in California, it will be more about perhaps the Moon square Saturn. So it doesn't really matter which way you're coming at it. There's still frustration and annoyance. And so Cancer, it's just important that you don't take anything too seriously, and you don't take things to heart. And just remember that in doing this forecast, it's just one day. It's just it's just a Tuesday. And so don't allow things to become too significant. So if something doesn't work, don't take it to heart. And it may be that it's not important. It may be that it just requires greater effort at a later stage. Things will get easier. And additionally, it's a transitional moment for you. The moon crossing the solstice point, 0 degrees Capricorn. You're moving from one phase to another phase, and so don't expect to do too much. Don't expect to accomplish too much, and don't take things to heart, and don't allow yourself to get annoyed too much by other people. Not everyone is going to be helpful, and their actions or non-actions could really frustrate you. And so what do you do about it? Well, one thing you could do is just do nothing. Another approach is just to be as independent as possible. Not put yourself in a situation where you might blame someone if things don't go to plan. If you are responsible for everything, then that could be empowering. Even if you are surrounded by other people, don't regard anyone as being especially significant. Though when the moon does move into Capricorn, it might not move into Capricorn until tomorrow if you're in Australasia, but when the moon does move into Capricorn, there is a change. And Capricorn is of course your opposite sign, and so it does mean that it could be very difficult not to discount the influence of other people. And when the moon moves into Capricorn, it makes that square to Saturn in Aries. And despite your efforts and your attempts to be objective, still some people are annoying, or might appear to be annoying. But what does that moon square Saturn mean? Moon square Saturn might be about you misunderstanding a situation that is there to help you. Perhaps it's a person who's there to help you, and you just have to harness them in terms of telling them what you want, and maybe they can help, maybe they can give good advice, but sometimes Cancerians can refuse good advice. Cancerians can be very stubborn sometimes, and they don't want to be told, and they can take things personally. So if you give advice to a Cancerian, or you suggest to a Cancerian that they got something wrong, they just might not take kindly to it. And so try to be open-minded, and just because someone seems to be blocking you or is offending your ego doesn't necessarily mean that you should reject them. And this moon square Saturn may additionally say something about relationships in general. Relationships, if relationships are important to you, if there is a particular relationship that matters, then there may be times when it doesn't necessarily work to plan, and you might be upset or confused by another person's reaction to you. And just don't be. Accept people as they are. And at the same time, as I've just said, your independence does matter. And no one should be in such a position where they can stop you. They can give you advice, they can give you pointers, they can sometimes be unhelpful, but does that matter? If something is important to you, Cancer, then you will find a way of doing it. But should you be trying to undertake huge tasks at the moment? Probably not. The moon as I said, the moon is square Mars, it's square Saturn. Moon is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, so it just could be a time when just things are frustrating, and you can't expect things to run smoothly all the time, and that just may be how the day pans out. Leo, you're quite capable of being very pleasant right now. You know what it takes to get people to like you. You do have a certain charm, and if you want to get close to people, then I think you can. And if you want to create sort of new connections, then that shouldn't be a problem. You don't necessarily have to meet people face to face. You can perhaps do it on the internet, or however else you might choose to do it, whether it's sort of text messages, emails, phone calls. So you can be at the center of things, and of course the sun continues to be in Leo. In fact, the sun is moving towards the very middle of Leo. So the central point of Leo is of course going to be halfway through the sign. That's 15 degrees of the sign. I think it's on Thursday that the sun is at 15 degrees Leo, and so it's a real sort of Leo time for you, and you can be at the center of things, and you are going to be very much appreciated, so you don't have to worry about that. And so that's one aspect of what's going on today. And additionally, Leo, if you don't like the way things are going, I'm not saying that anything's wrong with your world, but if it just so happens that you don't like the way things are going, or that you feel that maybe some change is required, then you're in a great position to actually make this change happen. You can do it through the power of your own will. So if you want something to happen, it can happen. And if you have an idea about a revolution, things being overthrown, perhaps the structure of your life, or some of the routines you're involved with, even some of the routines that other people are involved with, the things you're being forced to do, whatever it is, if you have an idea that it can all be changed, then Leo, I'm confident that really it can be changed. So you don't have to feel that you're stuck on any particular path, because you're not. But the change comes from within to begin with. Firstly, you decide what's wrong or how you'd like things to be, and then you start to put it into action. And when you put it into action, things are pretty straightforward, and all it requires is a system. And as the day continues, you're going to find it increasingly easy to create systems, and easy up to a point. I mean, it won't be something that you'll necessarily want to do, because it will seem boring. But if you go about the process of creating systems and new routines, new structures, then this is something you're going to be able to do very, very effectively. Not everyone is necessarily going to appreciate it. There may be criticism, there may be confusion, people not quite sure what you're up to, but if you know what you're doing, then really, Leo, it shouldn't be a problem. And also, as I said at the beginning of this piece on Leo, you're quite charming at the moment, and you're quite persuasive, and you're someone who can create connections. So if anyone's unhappy with what you're doing, this should be just a temporary state. You can explain yourself, you can smile, you can tell everyone that it's all for the best, and in most cases they will believe you. Virgo. At the moment, Virgo, you're in a state of maybe transition, but at the same time, you don't want to change. I mean, you know things are changing, but you'd prefer them not to. And some Virgos might be really quite sort of stuck in their ways. And one reason for this astrologically is that the moon is making a square to Mars, and Mars is, of course, a planet which is in your sign. I mean, Mars is now in the last degree of Virgo, getting ready to move into Libra. I think it moves into Libra is it tomorrow or the day after? And so with the moon moving into Libra, that is a change, and perhaps some of the pressure will be off you once Mars is out of your sign. But right now, it's still there. And so with Mars in Virgo, you want to hold on to what you have, and you may be aware that things are changing, because it is, as I've just said, it's a time of transition. But you perhaps think that through the force of your will and the force of your essential character, you can stop something happening. And so the moon square Mars could make you very stubborn. You really want to hold on to what you have, because you're not quite sure how the future is going to work out, and better to keep what you have rather than risk it by making some big change. But change will happen. The moon will move into Capricorn, and moon moving into Capricorn, that change, there's still annoyance there, because the moon is not just making a square to Mars, it's making a square to Saturn, and you can feel the pressure, but at the same time you want to show that you're in control, and so just be careful what you do and be careful what you say. And then the transition happens. Moon does move into Capricorn, and really, moon moving into Capricorn, it's not such a bad thing. I mean, okay, the moon does make that square to Saturn, which may be some passing inconvenience, but with the moon in Capricorn, you have a better sense of what you can do, and if you make the effort, you can do things well, especially as Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Venus. Mercury is your ruler, semi-sextile to Venus. Venus could be regarded as quite a creative planet, and also Venus is a planet of beauty and what looks good. And so with Mercury semi-sextile Venus, you're perhaps struggling to create something which looks good, which you're happy with, which gives you a sense of harmony. Again, it's not entirely easy to find, and you might resist it. You almost don't want harmony, part of you, because harmony is... It just is not quite what you want. Why would that be the case? I think it's because Mars is still in Virgo, and Mars in Virgo, Mars in your sign, Mars wants to critique, and it kind of wants to look for disharmony. Maybe especially in the last degree of Virgo, there is a view that planets in the last degree of a sign can be problematic, and maybe Mars is being especially problematic now, because it's moving towards an opposition of Saturn. So at an unconscious level, Virgo, you just might be looking for disharmony. Because it makes you feel better, because it makes you feel more real, makes you feel more alive. If you're alive, it means you can critique, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Perhaps things do have to be critiqued right till the very end. Always look for how things could be better. Because harmony is a nice word. It's perhaps a word I use too often. But the dark side of harmony is complacency. Everything's fine. Everyone's living happily together. They're not, but let's pretend. And so, in that sense, Virgo, you can be very real today. And sometimes I think that people need reality. And you might be the person to provide it. Libra. We have the moon starting to move into Capricorn, and it's not an unusual event. The moon moving into Capricorn. It happens, obviously once a month, but with the moon moving into Capricorn, sometimes you can become sort of introspective with this position, especially as the moon is making a square to Saturn, and you can see the external pressures that are out there. People requesting, even requiring that you do certain things. You don't want to do it, but you perhaps feel you have to, and it's annoying because you're going to be happiest just where you are. And the moon is not just making a square to Saturn, it's also making a square to Mars, and that does indicate, Libra, that there are things that could be annoying, and you might be of the view that if you want to avoid the annoyances, then it is better to be introspective. It's better to stay away from it all, and if you can close down the shutters, you're going to be safe, and you're not going to be distracted. But can you avoid people? I think the answer is probably not. Whatever you're doing, people's footprints are everywhere, and this might be something that you've been learning since Saturn went into Aries, and your opposite. Of course, Aries is your opposite sign. I think it was at the end of May that Saturn went into Aries, and so with Saturn in Aries, other people can't be avoided. The frustrations they bring can't be avoided, and that might be something that you're very aware of. The problem with closing things down, as you might want to do, is that you might be missing out on opportunities. And at the moment, Libra, you're quite energetic. You might not believe yourself to be energetic, but you are more active than you realize, and you can do more stuff than you realize. And if you were to be able to really push yourself and focus that energy, then you might be able to get quite a lot done. You might not enjoy focusing your energy. You'd rather be doing something else, or perhaps you'd rather be doing nothing at all. But if you do apply yourself, you decide that something is important and you want to give it everything, then there'll be no stopping you, and you just keep going. And perhaps it's about finding a safe place, and from this vantage point, you don't move, but you apply your energy, and once you start applying, you can really create something that could be unstoppable, but you're always staying still. You're always at the center of things, and maybe that's what you should aspire to do, to be at the center of the wheel. The wheel is spinning around as fast as it likes, but you're in the middle. You're not moving, but you're kind of directing and conducting it all. That is a possibility that I think that you should consider. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, relationships is always something that people worry about. People often worry about, especially in the context of sort of 12-sign astrology. But the moon is square Mars, and then the moon makes a square to Saturn, and then it makes a square to Neptune. So should one be positive about relationships? Yeah, probably not. I mean, most people are going to be of limited value today, and they could just be annoying. And if you put all your efforts into having to deal with another person, then at a certain point you just might feel that you're hitting a brick wall. I mean, the moon in the end moves into Capricorn, makes a square to Saturn, and just feels that things aren't moving. And so Libra, try as far as you can to sort of maintain your independence, but that doesn't mean to say you have to disappear. You can be in plain sight, but also you can at the same time, you can be in full control. Scorpio. Don't forget, Scorpio, that Mars is getting very close now to changing sign. It's just getting ready to move into Libra. And there's a lot to say about Mars moving into Libra. And I don't want to sort of go into what it means for Mars to be in Libra right now, but what is important is that Mars is within 1 degree of 0 degrees Libra. So that means that Mars is now opposition the Aries point. And so Mars opposition the Aries point is important. It says something about you and the public, you and the world. And like it or not, you are becoming very engaged in the world, and people are noticing you, and what you do and what you say can have an impact, and it works both ways. Things going on, maybe politically or economically, you feel it all. You understand that it's important, and probably the best way of dealing with this is to have a certain amount of objectivity. Now, Scorpio as a sign does have a reputation, and probably an unfair reputation, for being just too subjective, taking things personally, being a sea of emotion. But maybe Scorpio, you just understand the emotional dimension, and you just get it, and because you get it, you're able to rise above it. You're able to rise above the sea, and this objectivity that you can have is really going to help you, and it could help other people. Some people are really very confused. They don't know what's going on, and they may be afraid. But you, Scorpio, you can have a perspective. You can communicate in ways that are very calm and reasonable, and people are going to trust you. And also you can communicate to yourself, so there's no need to be afraid. If you just think things through and also feel things through, and so do try to cultivate a high level of objectivity, and trying not to be too passionate about things. Nothing at the moment is worth getting super passionate about, and so that's the right way of being. Now, there's going to be temptations to get annoyed, for sure. I mean, the moon is making a square to Mars. It's making a square to Saturn, and that moon square Mars, there are real temptations to express your feelings, to express your anger, but you somehow have to move beyond that and look at what is important. And perhaps when the moon moves into Capricorn and moves away from a square to Mars and instead makes a square to Saturn, that can allow you to show some self-discipline, and that self-discipline will also be shown in terms of the way you communicate, the things you say, and you do have the ability to calm things down. I mean, not just today, but into tomorrow as well. And so, overall, Scorpio, it does seem that you have a role. Society needs you to behave in a particular way, and yeah, you can be serious. But I think that having a certain objectivity could just be useful for everyone. Sagittarius. So the moon is moving through late Sagittarius, getting ready to move into Capricorn. And so, all of us, wherever we are, we're going to have a part of a day where the moon is in Sagittarius. And so when the moon is in Sagittarius, it makes a square to Mars. And perhaps this is the important aspect, certainly the important aspect if you're in Australia or New Zealand, because if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon doesn't move into Capricorn, it's in Sagittarius all day. But even if you're in the Americas, I mean, there's a big chunk of the day, especially in the morning, where the moon is in Sagittarius. And so moon square Mars, I would regard that as a favourable aspect, even though it sounds bad, like moon square, it doesn't sound good, does it? But moon square Mars can be very energizing, and you know what is important, you know where to put your energy, and you can be enthusiastic about it, and you can know where everything is required, and additionally, you'll have a certain amount of discipline, and so there might be temptations to get annoyed. If there might be frustrations. The moon is square Mars. The moon is applying to a square of Saturn. So a lot of people are going to be frustrated. Regardless of where their sign is. But you can take control of things, and you can decide where your efforts are required, and there might even be sort of a last minute rush. You kind of know that something needs to be finished. Ideally, it'll be finished today. Okay, you might want to wait until tomorrow, but whether it's today, tomorrow, it needs to be done, because if you leave it any longer, then the times might change, and what was possible today might be very, very difficult in a couple of days' time. So if you're aware of any pressure, then accept it, and do what is necessary. And additionally, I talked about focus, and you can be very focused, so you can almost be like a fusion reactor. Isn't the key of a fusion reactor to take the energy of the sun and to sort of hold it all together because you're dealing with huge amounts of temperature. But the fusion reactor works by taking that energy but keeping it in a container so that it can be harnessed and turned into electricity. So maybe that should be you. So you have a lot of energy, that's true, but you've got to contain that energy, because once if that energy is contained, then you can transfer it into effective action. And so maybe that should be your goal, over the next couple of days. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not even saying that you're going to be able to succeed, but I think it's Sagittarius, but it's certainly worth a go. Capricorn. At some stage, the moon will move into your sign. It might be as early as this morning, if you're in California, but it might not be until tomorrow if you're in Australasia. But whenever the moon moves into Capricorn, it's something to look forward to, because when the moon moves into Capricorn, it is energizing, and it reminds you of who you are, and what you can do, and also what you can't do. But it's a very down to earth placement, the moon moving into Capricorn. And additionally, with the moon moving into Capricorn, there might have been things that you've been planning on doing, and perhaps you postponed them. You thought that now wasn't quite the right time. But with the moon moving into Capricorn, you can get things off the ground in your own way, and in your own way does matter, because when the moon moves into Capricorn, it makes a square to Saturn, and at the moment Saturn is in Aries, and so many Capricorns are just still getting used to Saturn being in Aries. It's was it May that Saturn moved out of Pisces into Aries, and so it is about how you're expressing yourself. And Saturn in Aries, is about where you are, your surroundings. It could be your home, and all of this is very important to you. And it's also about the past, and it's your relationship to the past and what you've been building up over the past. And with the moon moving into Capricorn, making a square to Saturn, there is a challenge here. It's about sort of taking everything you are and everything you're trying to hold together and projecting it outwards, making it part of your overall self-expression. And part of you, Capricorn, probably does want to hold things back. Why reveal? You're dealing with things which are quite private, which are integral to who you are, but don't necessarily feel like they're anyone else's business. But sometimes you do have to show some openness, and I think that is definitely something you can do. It's not going to be easy, but you're thinking about a lot of things, and there is a restlessness at the moment to many Capricorns. And part of it is because you're just not entirely happy with the way everything is going. It's not about your life. It's about what other people are doing. It's the way the world is going, and it doesn't seem great. And so you would really like things to change, and indeed things really can change, and you can be the one who creates this kind of this change. And it's because it's all properly organized. You can sort it out, so you don't have to be happy with the way things are. You can have a vision, and you can really turn that vision into reality. Turning to relationships, Moon is square Saturn, and whenever the Moon is square Saturn, one does need to think about how you and another person are getting on with one another, especially as the Moon is square Mars and is square Saturn, and of course Mars and Saturn are going to be opposition each other later in the week. And so Moon square Mars square Saturn might indicate that relationships are not necessarily going to be great. There may be very real tensions that are coming out into the open. You can see them, and if you push the matter, you decide you want to spend time with another person, and you want to see where things are going, well, these tensions might come out into the open. And so in that situation, Capricorn, be very aware of how you get on with other people and how things have how things have progressed in the past. And don't be naive. Don't think that an old problem has necessarily sorted itself out, or think that someone has suddenly changed. Remember, people don't change. It's a myth to think that people change, and all about leopards and their spots. And things do stay the same, and so don't be naive when dealing with other people. But maybe you can go into a relationship with open eyes. You know what someone is like. You know what they're capable of doing, and you're ready for it. And so, perhaps a realistic approach can be useful, but it can perhaps create a situation where something can be resolved. But that does require a degree of courage, and maybe you'll take the view, Capricorn, that it's not worth the effort. So don't feel that you have to do anything for another person, or you don't feel that you have to get close to anyone. You have to do what's best for yourself. Aquarius, you are not entirely comfortable with the way everything is. None of us should be comfortable with the way things are, because things could always be better. And at the moment, Aquarius, you're getting restless. You know that something is happening. Something is changing in the background, and you also are aware, perhaps, that things just can't go on like this forever. And so maybe, Aquarius, you're of a view that let's make it happen now. Let's not stay and remain in this state of utter sort of restlessness. Nothing is happening, but everyone knows that something will happen in the end, and we can wait and wait and wait and be surprised when something just occurs. Let's make it happen now. And this reflects the fact that this coming week is difficult. I mean, there are a load of important aspects going on. We were about to have Mars opposition Saturn. Remember, Saturn is your ruler. Mars is going to be opposition Saturn. The Sun is going to be sesquiquadrate Saturn. So you can feel the build up, and so maybe you think that it should be now. Let's see the full picture, and let's not wait. And that is absolutely understandable. But maybe, Aquarius, you should just go with the tension a little bit longer. Because if you can handle this kind of tension, this can give you a degree of understanding. You can start to sort of understand other people, and you can understand yourself, and you can understand the overall situation and what is the best thing to do. And right now, you may not be entirely sure what the best thing to do is, and I don't think you'll be helped by the fact that Mercury is retrograde. Mercury is retrograde. Mercury is in your opposite sign of Leo, and so that says something about yourself, but it also says something about other people, and how other people can be unstable and difficult to predict, and they may be particularly unpredictable over the next couple of days. So perhaps, Aquarius, you should just stay with it. On the other hand, I don't think that from a social viewpoint today need be a complete disaster. I think some people are very friendly right now, and you yourself can be quite friendly, and you can get on with people, provided nothing is at stake, provided that serious issues are not being discussed, provided there's not a history of conflict. So in terms of your social life, rather than thinking about people from the past, maybe you should be thinking about people from the future. And if there are new people you want to interact with on a very simple level, then that might be a good way of making the most of today's energies. Pisces, you might have to be quite patient today. Things may not be entirely easy, and not everyone is going to be as supportive as you might like. I mean, after all, the moon is in Sagittarius, and it's making a square to Mars. So, Moon square Mars, Moon square Mars, this aspect can be a problem. Mars might represent a person or a situation who is in your way. They're preventing you from, doing what you want to do at perhaps the speed you would like to do it. And so you might have ideas about what can be accomplished, and because of factors, outside your control, it just may not be possible. So, it's important that you don't get frustrated. A lot of people are frustrated. It's not just going to be a Pisces thing. In fact, there are going to be other signs that are going to be, a lot more frustrated from you. But, the moon, it makes a square to Mars, doesn't just make a square to Mars, it makes a square to Saturn. And, so moon is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so things could be annoying, and there could be things turning up that you really didn't want to have to deal with. For example, could be about money, could be about just some small detail that, as far as you're concerned, should be irrelevant, but it's not irrelevant, and it has to be attended to, or at least there's pressure to attend to it. So it could be hard to relax, and even if you're trying to enjoy yourself, you're trying to be with people who are on your wavelength, even then, it might not work out. So don't take things personally, and if possible, try not to have too many expectations of yourself, and even when you feel that there are moments where you could do something, where you might feel, well, this is a moment where Pisces can take action. Even then, it just might not happen, particularly if you go about things in the wrong way. So, what do you do if action is required, or you feel that action is required? You need to move things along. Well, there's always a way of doing it, but you have to take everything seriously. If you take something lightly and you think it's all going to be easy and you don't have to try too hard, you don't have to do too much planning, then it could turn out to be a real problem. On the other hand, Pisces, if you just go in with the assumption that everything is going to be hard work, everything is going to be difficult, everything is going to require a lot of planning. If you go in with that assumption, then things might be okay. You can take your power and you can distill it and you can focus it, and in that way you can start to see results. But I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. Things are tough, and again, that's just the way it is, and you should not treat it as being anything personal. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now I want to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 5, which is waiting. So we are waiting for something to happen. And this kind of links with what's going on astrologically, because, today the moon is in sort of late Sagittarius, early Capricorn, depending on our time zone. So there is this changeover. And, also we're on the brink of quite a difficult week, and Mars is about to change sign. It's about to move into Libra, where it's going to be opposition Saturn. So we know that things are about to get hectic, and so we are waiting. And so, what do we do? I mean, that's one view of this hexagram. I mean, another view of this hexagram is that we actually have to do something. We have to make that first move. And you could see this in the context of a river. So there is a river. We have to cross this river. We are waiting to cross this river. But we know it has to happen in the end. And of course, crossing this river means going into this river. There's no bridge. We've got to walk into this river. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you walk into rivers, but you have to walk into this river. You have to get your clothes wet. This is inevitable. And the question is, when do we do it? What stage do we take action? So we can't hang around forever, but sometimes we have to hang around a bit, because we want to be able to take action at the best possible opportunity, where we got the best chance of being successful. Now the top line moves, and the top line it's quite an interesting line. It's saying that we fall into a pit, but things don't look good, or we're in a very dark space. We're in somewhere quite cavernous, and so waiting in a cavern or in a pit, having fallen somewhere, and it's just not good. At least that is the first position. But then the I Ching talks about uninvited guests. Indeed, it talks about 3 uninvited guests. People turn up, and if people are turning up, our initial view is, well, this isn't good. Things are just going to move from bad to worse, and we're not in the mood to trust anyone. But people that turn up, well, they could represent a problem, but they might actually represent rescue, and that's what they probably represent. So if we do find today that things suddenly go badly wrong and that we are completely stuck, then it's quite likely that help is at hand. So that's one way of interpreting this. An alternative interpretation would be, as in waiting, that we are stuck. We do not want to move, and we don't want to cross the river, but we have to cross the river. So what happens? Well, in the end, we get pressure. Someone pressures us to make the move, and whether we like it or not. So if you are in the mood for procrastination and you don't want to do anything, you don't want to make a decision, that pressure will eventually turn up. And there might almost literally be people knocking on your door saying, "Where are you? We're missing you. You need to get yourself together." But it may be you knocking on your own door saying, you can't procrastinate forever. The move has to happen. And because of this moving line, that means that we move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. And the taming power of the small is one of those sort of dense clouds, no rain hexagrams. There are a few hexagrams like that. There are clouds. In fact, I'm looking out a window. There are a lot of clouds, and there are no rain. So it's exactly the kind of weather I'm looking at right now. Dense clouds, no rain. I don't know how dense the clouds are, but certainly no rain at the moment. And what this is talking about is disciplining us, the small. Left to our own devices, we might be doing just loads of things, small things. Remember, Mars is still in Virgo. Mars is in the last degree of Virgo. Mars in Virgo wants to be busy, doing lots of different things. And all of these things don't really amount to very much. They're just filling in time. And we're not being helpful. We could be making things worse, actually. And so the taming power of the small is forces out there are trying to control us and stop us from wasting our time and just being involved in things which are not helpful to anyone. And so we need to be sort of more focused and not feel that we have to do anything. And so how does this relate to the previous hexagram? I think it does indicate that maybe this waiting that I've been talking about is perhaps an ongoing process. we're waiting for something to happen. We know it has to happen. And while we're waiting, we have this frustration that we don't know what to do. We think we should be doing something, but whatever we're doing, it's not very helpful. And again, it could be waiting for what happens later in the week, because later in the week, there's a lot of astrological stuff going on, as I've already discussed in this video. And, we might feel we're on the brink of something, and maybe it's just not quite the right time to go over the edge, although there is pressure. And I did talk about procrastination, and some of us might be procrastinating. And the question is, what are we doing while we are procrastinating? We might not be doing anything very useful. So we have to be sort of mature and disciplined. And I get the feeling that timing is very important. A lot of us may be wanting to do stuff, but we may be getting our timing wrong. And so, how do we know when is the right time? Well, perhaps we should wait and see what pressure is asserted on us, for example, by other people knocking on our door or telling us, what are you doing? When we're being told that we're delaying, then that is a sure sign that maybe the time for movement has arrived. And finally, it's time to go back to the astrology. And I do briefly want to look at Marilyn Monroe's horoscope. I mean, she is an iconic figure. She did die 63 years ago. I mean, she died in 1962, so she died the year I was born. So what was I? So she was born. I was July, August. I was about 2 months old when she died, and still people haven't forgotten her. So it's quite incredible that she can persist for so long. So let's just quickly look at her chart and also the chart of her death. So here's Marilyn Monroe's horoscope, and she has true Black Moon Lilith rising. So she has Leo rising. I think that she looks like Leo rising, and I think that in terms of her Gemini, she was someone who was obviously very familiar with her Gemini, and she knew what it meant to be a Gemini. I think that she said that being a Gemini was being like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, two different people. So she was sort of aware of that, and yes, she had that true Black Moon Lilith rising, and she had a Saturn-Neptune square. And so that Saturn-Neptune square, I mean, it's a collective energy, Saturn-Neptune, but it was around in 1926. And so Saturn and Neptune, well, she's got Neptune rising, she's got Neptune in the first house. And so you can see how that Saturn-Neptune potentially might trip her up. And also, with a collective aspect like Saturn and Neptune, maybe most people or many people who have Saturn square Neptune don't feel it. It's not necessarily an important part of their daily life. But in her case, I think it is very descriptive. You Neptune in the first house. You think of the glamour and the bright lights, and also the barbiturates that killed her. I think it was barbiturates that killed her. Of course, there's big arguments about who administered the barbiturates. Was it just an overdose? Was she murdered? Was it an accident? And then the Saturn square Neptune is about wanting to be part of something else, but there is a fear there, and that's Saturn in Scorpio. So with Marilyn Monroe, I said I don't want to spend too long on her chart. There is a question of her death and what was going on, when she died. So I think the general view is that she died on August the 4th at around 9:30 p.m. I don't think anyone is going to know precisely when she died, and so here's the chart for when she died. So remember, she had true Black Moon Lilith rising in her chart, and so at the time she died, the moon was conjunct true black moon Lilith. So there was a real sort of true black moon Lilith feel to it, and sort of Mars was conjunct the IC, and so Venus and Venus was potentially on the 7th house cusp. So Venus is a universal significator of women. I mean, Marilyn Monroe was a hugely famous woman at the time in 1962, and so of course, women die every day, but Marilyn Monroe, in terms of what was going on in society, not just in America, she was famous across the West, and so at the time she died, potentially, if Pisces was rising, you could see Venus setting. So Venus setting would be, the 7th house does have a connection with death and something about to go below the horizon, and so that strikes me as being quite appropriate. And then we could think about her solar return, the solar return before she died. So she had her solar return on so that's her converse solar return. I don't think I want to look at that. But this is her solar return. So her solar return was on June the 1st, 1962. And so this chart kind of seems weird to me because I was born on May the 30th, 1962. So she had her solar return a couple of days after I was born, and maybe that's why I do find her horoscope and her life quite interesting. I know everyone finds it interesting, but I do find her an interesting person, and someone who's widely underestimated. She wasn't stupid, and she was in many ways sort of ahead of her times. But in her solar return, the moon is certainly of interest here, because the moon is very close to Algol. There is that fixed star, Algol, associated with evil. The moon is, of course, perhaps a universal significator of women, and it's so. A lot of people would have moon conjunct Algol at the time of their solar return, but perhaps if you're Marilyn Monroe, it's sort of extra poignant. It really does mean something. And Venus was in Cancer, close to the IC. Again, I don't think that Venus conjunct the IC should logically indicate death. Not really. But it's you could say Venus in Cancer, the woman hidden, the woman who goes into the void. That might be a way of looking at it, but I think one's probably reading too much into it. And with her sun, so her sun was in the 2nd house, so her sun was applying to a square of Jupiter, and you might say, using Placidus house cusps, that Sagittarius covers a great chunk of her 8th house. So maybe there is a Jupiter relationship to the 8th house, and also Jupiter is in the 12th house, and so that Sun square Jupiter is, potentially saying that there might be a problem here. You might connect it with death, and of course the Sun was making a square to Jupiter, but a square to Pluto. But I do find the solar return problematic because it echoes so many things in my own chart. I've got Sun square Jupiter. I've got Mars at around 2 degrees. Well, I've got my Mars at 0 degrees Taurus, so it's kind of difficult to separate the solar return from my own chart. And that Sun square Jupiter is going to mean different things to different people. I mean, Sun square Jupiter means something to me because I have it in my horoscope, but in Marilyn Monroe's case, it was an indicator that she was, about to die. And then there are solar arc directions, and there is one solar arc direction which I do find interesting. So she died at 36. By the way, 36 in Indian astrology, your Saturn matures when you are at 36 years old, and I don't want to look at her Hindu chart specifically, but so she has in her Vedic chart, she has Cancer rising. So that means that Saturn rules her 7th house and her rules her 8th house as well. So you could say that in her case, the 8th house has something to do perhaps with death and the ruler of the 8th house. And her Saturn matured at the age of 36. And of course, Princess Diana also died at the age of 36. Although Marilyn Monroe did live, I think, for one day, just over a day longer than Princess Diana. That's sort of, if you actually look at how long they lived, and you've a precise amount of time from their birth, the moment of their birth, to the moment of their death, you'll find that Marilyn Monroe lived for, I think it was about a day or just over a day longer. Just that's a point of trivia that I thought I would inflict upon you. And so that's a key point about 36. I think 36, I don't know if you think back, if you're past the age of 36, then think back, what was your 37th year like? Because in Indian astrology it's supposed to be quite significant. It's when all the planets have matured. Okay, I think Rahu and Ketu still haven't matured, but it's the last of the actual planets to mature. Now, turning to the solar arc directions, so here is her solar arc directions, moving everything 36 degrees. And if we look at the directions to her chart, her solar arc directed midheaven was at 10 degrees Gemini. So she had solar arc directed midheaven on her sun. And to be honest, if she'd been coming to me for astrological advice and I was looking at that sun midheaven conjunct her sun, I'd probably be quite enthusiastic about it. I'd say, oh, this is good for your career. It's good. It should be good. And Barack Obama, by the way, he's just got midheaven conjunct his solar arc midheaven on his Jupiter. But you could say that solar arc on midheaven on her Jupiter, on her sun when she died, this, in a way, her death sealed her reputation. I mean, Marilyn Monroe was already sort of on the decline. She would have just declined and deteriorated as she got older. And perhaps, I mean, I don't think she would have been quite forgotten, but it would have undermined her posterity and her legacy. But by dying when she died, she remained a legend. She remained who she is. That face. Everything is in place, and so she didn't have the indignity, you could say, of growing old. Not that growing old is an indignity, but it might not have been very dignified for her, as things were already starting to go wrong. I mean, I think that her life, her lifestyle, and her sort of mental health were having its toll. But perhaps the midheaven on her sun just sealed the deal, sealed her legacy, and the fact that now 63 years after she's dead, after she died, she's still an icon. And now I want to switch to Spain and the 13 Roses. Now, I'd never heard of this before. I mean, to my complete shame, I'd never heard of this. But in Spain, it's a very big deal. So you had the Spanish Civil War, and in 1939, the nationalists, or Franco, supported by Hitler and Mussolini, he won this war. And after winning this war, it was a bit of a bloodbath. His opponents were imprisoned, tortured, massacred, and that was a feature of his rule. And particularly at the end of the Civil War. And one of the executions, the mass executions, was the 13 young women who had, they were young, they were, mainly in their sort of 20s, and these women. They were all members, I think they were members of something called the United Socialist Youth, and a lot of them, they came from sort of working class backgrounds. I think a lot of them were dressmakers. They were also political activists, and so they were all sort of executed. 13 of them were executed on the 5th of August 1939, and that's why 13 of them, and they were called the 13 Roses. And here is the chart for the execution. I've gone for 7:30. I sort of asked ChatGPT to tell me what time they were executed. ChatGPT was sure that it was around 7:30. I mean, give or take half an hour. So I'm just going with 7:30. If I've got that wrong, my apologies. And so, as a chart of an execution of women, this chart arguably describes it quite well, because you have got Venus is a universal significator of women. And you can see that Venus is in Leo, and Venus is square Saturn. It's square the nodes. It's conjunct Pluto. So Venus here is under a huge amount of pressure here. I mean, it's you've got you've got it on the nodes, conjunct Pluto, square Saturn. I mean, Venus square Saturn would be, you could say, a natural significating aspect of the death of women or bad things happening to women, and Venus particularly young women. And Uranus at the same time is on the midheaven, so that fits. And there's a Moon-Jupiter conjunction. I mean, you might say, oh, well, Moon-Jupiter conjunction, that's great, that's in Aries, but it's in Aries, and so an execution, well, Aries, it's a fire sign. You might say that, but it's to do with shots being fired, and the moon, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, well, in the whole sign houses it would be in the 9th, but in the Placidus it's in the 8th house, and so Moon-Jupiter in the 8th, an execution, a death of moon, the moon conjunct Jupiter, a death of young women. I think that arguably does fit. And so those are a few thoughts about the execution itself. And then you had the full moon before the execution. So the moon is waning. So looking at the full moon just before this execution, I've got it somewhere. So this is, if you like, the prenatal moon, the pre-event full moon, and sort of notice how the full moon set for Madrid, July the 31st, 1939. So just under a week before the execution, had the ascendant at 23 degrees Leo, and so just going back to the execution itself, or if that time is right, 7:30. Well, we don't know whether that time is right, but. If it was 7:30, it would be 25 Leo, so it's picking up on the ascendant of the full moon. But going back to this chart, notice how Mercury and true black moon Lilith are sort of exactly opposition each other at the time of that full moon. And so they're on the ascendant, so that may say something about the nature of this full moon. And true black moon Lilith, is that about the death of women? Uranus is on the midheaven, but it's also Mercury is there, so it is not an event that has been forgotten. So people, there's a memorial in Spain. People still remember it, and so it's not just another tragedy that took place during the Civil War. Now, so 13 people got killed. The woman who perhaps got the most attention was, forgive me, I haven't sorted out the pronunciation. I tried to get the pronunciation right, but I'd looked on YouTube. I didn't have enough time to hear someone pronounce it properly. But her name was Julia Conesa, and she's just one of the 13. But she's the one, there's a picture of her, and her last letter to her family is quite famous, and she wrote this letter. And one thing she said in this letter is that she finished this letter by saying, "May my name never be erased from history." So that's quite a poignant thing to say. So people have been quite keen to keep her memory alive. And so here is her horoscope. We don't have her time of birth, at least I don't have her time of birth. So she was born on May the 25th, 1919. So she was 20 when she was executed. And so as far as her horoscope is concerned, it is difficult not having a time of birth. I mean, she has the moon in Aries, almost certainly has the moon in Aries. Okay, if she was born right at the beginning of the day, then the moon might have been in Pisces. But so when you think about the moon in Aries, and it's a female chart. Okay, she's a young woman, so she's starting to move with Sun in Gemini, moon in Aries, and so you think that moon in Aries, is quite dynamic. She was concerned about things. She was an activist. That's the sort of moon in Aries thing to be doing. And Sun in Gemini, she wrote this sort of last letter, so she got her words out. And then as far as the execution is concerned, and what was going on, what was going on in her chart when this happened, well, it's kind of I won't say unfortunate, but this is just a reminder that Jupiter can have many manifestations. So the moon, if she was born at noon, it was at the time of her lunar return. And Jupiter was making a conjunction to her moon. I mean, we don't know how close that conjunction to her moon was, but that was, as far as I can see, the most important transit for her at the time of her execution, and of course not just her execution, the execution of 12 others. So that was one event that took place on August the 5th, 1939, and I thought I should mention it. Not least because I'd never heard about it. I never heard about it before. I looked it up yesterday. I'm making this video on Monday. I looked it up on the Sunday, and I had never heard of this event before, so I thought I wanted to talk about it. I thought that would be a good idea, and that would be the right thing to do. And finally, it is Marine Le Pen's birthday today. So happy birthday, Marine Le Pen. And she is 57. So Marine Le Pen is 57 years old, and with Marine Le Pen, and I've always sort of thought there's something ever so slightly tragic about Marine Le Pen. I mean, I know that she wants to be president. Of course, now she's had legal issues because of some French court has banned her from public office, from standing for public office in future. And her chart is problematic. I mean, she's got a Mars-Saturn square. She's got Saturn in Aries in the 7th, in its fall. That talks about her enemies and perhaps strong enemies. And the fact that she's got Mars square Saturn, is not great. I mean, it makes things, very frustrating for her. And so the question is, are her frustrations just going to continue? I mean, my hunch would be that she would never. She's just not going to be president. I don't think that she's, especially lucky. I mean, obviously she's done quite well politically, but how far is she going to go? I mean, I'm not giving any formal prediction here that she will never be president. I'm not saying that, but I'm just not convinced that she's especially fortunate. And you can see, at the moment, she's coming up to her Saturn return. I mean, Saturn is just gone into Aries. Okay, Saturn will move out of Aries and move into Pisces. So that might give her a temporary respite, but Saturn will go back into, will return to Aries, and so, but Saturn return is just not great, and that fact that Saturn is moving towards her 7th house cusp, so more sort of enemies. And one wonders how useful that Mars in the 10th house is. Mars in Cancer in the 10th house, Mars in the last degree of Cancer, if it's a sort of anaretic degree. I mean, I know a lot of people watching his videos regard the anaretic degree as being important, as being especially difficult. And so it's her 57th birthday. So if you're into sort of annual rulers, annual perfections, then if I got this right, that would mean that so she's going to be 60 in 2028, and so 60, 59, let's go 58, 57. So 57th birthday, that means she's covered by the 10th house. So when you're 57, when you hit 57, and she's just turned 57, it's always going to relate to your 10th house. I mean, regardless of who you are. But one has to look at the state of her 10th house to get some idea about what the year ahead is going to be like. And the 10th house is maybe problematic because it's got a fallen Mars there. And that doesn't help. And the ruler of the 10th house is the moon. And the moon is at 2 degrees Capricorn. And so, again, that's also not good. And part of a problem with her moon in Capricorn is that she's got moon square Chiron, and I sort of mentioned that there is a certain sort of tragedy to Marine Le Pen. At least that's my reaction to her horoscope. And Chiron can be about wounds, and it's square her moon. Moon in Capricorn, that perhaps represents her moon in Capricorn. And then you've got Saturn and Neptune. I mean, Saturn and Neptune. Well, Neptune, I think, was square her Neptune, was square her moon recently, and sort of next year she's going to have Saturn and Neptune square her moon. So I think that is going to be very difficult for her. So I'm not convinced that this year is going to be great. I mean, we do have a solar return for her. So here is Marine Le Pen's solar return. And this solar return, though, does give us a different view. This solar return perhaps is more optimistic because it is a sun rising solar return. You've got 14 Leo rising, you've got sun at 13, and at 13 Leo. Chiron's on the midheaven, though. I mean, Chiron on the midheaven might be talking about her ambitions and her perhaps not being able to achieve her ambitions, or realizing that she's not going to be able to achieve her ambitions. As far as I know, Marine Le Pen has kind of said to Jourdain Bardella that he's the one who should be running for presidency. So I think she's actually already accepted that she's not going to be president, if I've got this right. And so you could say that the sun is a male planet, the men in her life, that's quite strong, it's rising. So just because she doesn't stand for presidency doesn't mean to say that it's necessarily the end of the world for her. I'm sure she'd be very happy if Jourdain Bardella were to win the presidency in 2027. And this takes us forward to 2027. And from an annual perfection point of view, if we continue on this sort of annual perfection line, I mean, it's not a technique that I use sort of all the time, but it's a relatively, I mean, it's an very old technique because it has Hellenistic pedigree, but at the same time, it's relatively new. I mean, it's only over the last few decades that astrologers have really started getting into it. And so from an annual perfection view, so she is now entering the sort of a year ruled by the moon. So next year, starting August the 5th, August the 5th, 2026, is covered by the next sign along. which is going to be covered by Leo. So next year, the Sun will be her annual ruler, and her Sun is quite strong because she's got the Sun in Leo. And what happens in the year between August 26 and August 27? Well, there is a presidential election. So here is the horoscope of the second round of the presidential elections for 2027, which I think take place on April the 25th, 2027. So at that time, Jupiter is in Leo. So she will have Jupiter quite close to her Sun, and Jupiter is going to be especially important because the Sun is going to be her annual ruler at the time of the election, using profections, and so Jupiter being close to that Sun, may give her a real boost, and even if she doesn't win the elections, if Jordan Bardella, for example, wins, then that would be good. That would be good enough. Will Jordan Bardella win? I don't know. I'm certainly not saying he will. Jordan Bardella is another issue. Jordan Bardella, he has a problem. He has a problem chart as well. But as I've already discussed, but I'm sure I'll be looking at his chart quite soon. So there's kind of mixed messaging with Marine Le Pen as far as her birthday is concerned. I mean, I think it's going to be quite a difficult year for her, and I don't think it's going to be easy. And when Neptune, Saturn does go out of Aries, but it does go back in next year, and Saturn will be square her moon, and so it could be a problem. But I need to give this whole thing more thought, and so I will be returning to the theme of Marine Le Pen and the future elections, hopefully sooner rather than later. So thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.